Hi, everybody. This is Murdy Terry, and this is another, well, what will I call it? Another program? No, it's more of a let's learn a little bit about the state of Connecticut with On the Other Hand. So, On the Other Hand means that Murdy Terry is not a politician anymore. Murdy Terry is just you and me asking questions, getting answers, and making our decisions. So, welcome to On the Other Hand. Now, I think you'll be really, really pleased with my guests today. Tonight is our former state senator, Joe Markley. So let me tell you something about Joe. This is the first time Joe and I have sat down and talked to each other, and while we were waiting for our good people in the production room to set up, we got to talk to each other and get to know each other, and I found out we have a lot in common. So let's tell you about Joe. I'm not going to call him Joe Markley. I'm going to call him Joe. Joe is an American politician who was a member of the Connecticut State Senate, representing the 16th State Senate District from 2011 to 2019. A native of Southington, Connecticut. Now, this is going to tickle you. He was first elected to the state senate in 1984 at the age of 27, serving only one term, which I'm going to ask him about after this because he just made me laugh. He returned to the chamber in 2010, right?
Correct.
He was the Republican nominee for the Lieutenant Governor of Connecticut in 2018. Now, I'm not going to go back and ask him about that 27-year-old thing yet, because I want to tell you something that really tickled me. But, you ready for this? When Lowell Weicker proposed the state income tax for Connecticut in 1991, Joe, along with Tom Scott, formed the Connecticut Taxpayers Committee to spearhead the opposition. On October 5th, 1991, they organized the largest rally in Connecticut history to be held on the grounds of the state capitol. I wish he had hung right on with that because, boy, they have really taken us for a ride with our state income tax. Wait, I forgot. We're going back. Let's go back to you were elected to the state senate at the age of 27 for one term. Tell me why.
Well, it was 1984 was Reagan landslide.
Okay.
And it was also the days of the party lever, if you remember, when you used to walk in and there you could pull one lever and you'd get all the Republicans, or one lever and get all the Democrats.
I love that.
So I ran in the 16th district at that point, hadn't been Republican since 1952.
Oh, wow.
Since the first Eisenhower election. So there was no big line of people waiting to run for it. They figured it was a lost cause. So even though I was a young fellow, I got the idea, and I ran in '84. And I ran a good campaign as far as it goes. But the reason I got elected was because the people of my district, which was largely Waterbury in those days,
right,
were Reagan Democrats. They were Democrats, but they liked Ronald Reagan. So they pulled the Republican lever, and they got me
in there,
as well as Reagan. In 1986 was the last election with the party lever, and that I didn't have Ronald Reagan that time. I had Julie Balaga, if you remember her,
oh, yes,
against Bill O'Neill, and she got beaten very badly. And so we lost almost every seat we picked up in 1984. We lost in 1986, my own included. And I was very involved in politics
at a young age.
For a while afterwards. And I was the chairman of the party in Southington subsequently. As you said, I was involved with my friend Tom Scott in the anti-income tax.
Right.
But I didn't run for the seat again because it was a very difficult seat. I thought even if I get it back, they'll keep coming after me. Never thought I would be back again. And just the way life is, you know how it is, Murdy.
It just goes around.
It goes around in ways you don't expect. And in 2010, I'd moved out of state. I'd been out of politics for years, but I moved back to Southington, and shortly thereafter the Republicans in Southington came to me and said, "We don't have anyone to run for that seat you used to have." And I said, well, I was 27 the first time I ran and 54 the second time. It's a lot different when you're 54, you think twice, but I got the seat back and was back there for 8 years.
I know you were back there for 8 years.
Yeah.
I thought that was really great. I thought, wow, you know. And I wish you were still there, but.
Well, we've got, I wouldn't have run for lieutenant governor and given the seat up, except that I had my good friend Rob Sampson,
Okay.
who was the state representative, in line to take the seat.
Oh.
And Rob is a tiger, and he's a good conservative like myself,
Yeah,
so
right.
I'm happy to have him there.
Oh, that's nice. I'm glad. But you brought so much knowledge to that seat in the legislature that it breaks my heart to think that, you know, you didn't make it into, you know, being lieutenant governor, but just
Well,
wasn't our.
That's politics. It's
Yeah.
like sports. You can't
can't tell.
You can't tell, and you have to take the chance. And I didn't. I have to say, when I was there for only 2 years, I got beat. And I thought, gee, I was enjoying that. I went back for 8 years, and I enjoyed it again, and it was a great honor and very interesting. But I haven't missed it a day. It's also very demanding. And
It
I'm
is.
happy to be.
It is demanding.
I'm happy to be out in the real world.
But you know, the problem is that someone like you that has that much experience and knows the ins and outs, when we lose that kind of knowledge, then I say, okay, I look around what's happening with the legislature now, and I say, there's nobody there to really fight for us, the little guy. And that to me breaks my heart.
Well, there's some good people, and it also gives me a chance to work with candidates, which I like doing very well. So it's not like I'm not there. I have a chance to be a kind of a mentor to people that want to run for office. So that's what I'm doing.
I like that. I think that's great. Anyway, there are certain things that you fight for or are a champion for, okay? So I did do my homework.
Okay.
Okay, I just want you to know I did my homework. I always like to know, what do my guests stand for?
Yeah.
What do they stand for? And sometimes they stand for things that I stand for, and sometimes they don't. But it's always healthy for people to have some dialogue about these
That's
things,
right.
Okay, and you and I agree, number one, we are walking in lockstep here, because one of your first issues I'm going to use, because I've got issues that I'm going to be bringing forth, is fiscal responsibility. And one of your statements tickled me. It really tickled me. I'm reading this today and putting down my notes, and I've said, this is my kind of gentleman. I am the descendant of a long line of old Yankees. Don't laugh in
And
the
a few
middle of
Irishmen.
it. Don't laugh in the middle of your joke. And I have inherited their thrift. Give me a budget and I will cut it. I sat there at the computer and I laughed. I went, this is my kind of gentleman. It's like running a household.
That's right.
Right? It's a, you know, you look at all the pie in the sky things you'd like, but then you look at what you can afford and you say, okay, I can't afford a new TV.
That's right.
So you cut your budget, right? Because I have to pay my property tax,
That's
so
right.
on and so forth. So I really, really like that. But I'd like you to talk a little bit more about how you would go about cutting the budget.
Well, I think the first thing you say is that a government has to live within its means, just like we do.
Wait a minute. I think I'm getting a flash here.
Yeah.
Did you really say they have to live within their means?
That's right.
Okay.
And the idea is to say, let's look at the existing revenue
Okay.
and limit ourselves to that. I've said every time I ran, I will never support a tax increase. I feel like they're taking too much money already. And the problem is, times get a little bad, as we've had a lot of bad times in Connecticut. Government isn't getting in as much money as they want. And they say, we're going to reach deep into people's pockets. What they have to understand is, it's at those moments that the people aren't making enough.
That's right.
When revenue is down, it's because income's down.
Yes.
You can't ask more of people at that time. The government has to find a way to cut back. And I like to say that Melchizedek, the Lord went to Melchizedek and Abraham 5,000 years ago and said, you have to give me 10%. He never came back and said, now I want 12% or 15%. That's what government has to do at a certain point. It has to say, we're taking a percentage. If times are good, revenues will grow. And then if you want to do more things, you can do them. But don't don't hit the people hard when times are bad. Because of these tax increases, we've destroyed this economy in Connecticut. Now, your question is, how do we cut?
Yeah.
First of all, the number one thing you need is executive leadership. It's very tough to do it as a legislator. You need a governor that is in control of the budget and in control of the mechanism of the government that can come up with a budget that makes sense. I think we have to. There's certain things government simply shouldn't be doing, and those things should go. I was, if you have a sheet of things I was involved with, the thing I might have been most known for was opposition to the busway that they built between Hartford and New
I
Britain.
didn't catch that, but you know what? That's a perfect one, the busway.
Well, the busway, so I get elected, I go up there in 2011, I'm on the Appropriations Committee, and I start to see, what's this busway? What's this all about? And it's $600 million. I think it's a 9-mile road, $600 million, that doesn't make sense.
Oh, wait a minute. Did you hear that? I'm going to ask Joe to repeat it. Go ahead.
9 miles, $600 million. Murdy, I sat down, I started to divide. I said, okay, 600 million divided by, I think it's 9.2. Okay, and then if I divide it by 5,280, how much is it per foot? I came down to how much is it per inch? $959 an inch. And I thought, that's it. I'm going to go out and say we're paying $1,000 an inch,
yes,
because
right.
That's just about what it cost us.
Yes.
And we're subsidizing it now over $20 million a year to operate it. Now,
9 miles.
9 miles. And with a dead end on either end. It's not like it hooks you up to a railroad or it hooks you up to anything. It's just and we only did it because there was a federal grant available. And they said, where could we build something that we could put in for this federal grant? Oh, we've got this old rail line between Hartford and New Britain, so let's do it there. Now, I'm sure that some people are benefiting from it. But government has to be realistic in say for $600 million and $20 million a year, is it worth it?
$20 million a year.
Well, this is one of the problems with a budget is, once an item goes in, people stop worrying about it.
That's
they
true.
say, oh, okay, we're paying that. It's almost, again, like you're talking about what do you do with your household. You say, oh, cable bill, $120. So say, okay, maybe we can't afford that. Maybe we have to get rid of HBO or whatever.
Exactly.
And it's the same with this. We're subsidizing transportation. We run a train line called Shoreline East from New Haven out along the shore through Madison, Guilford,
Right,
Branford.
right.
Those rides are subsidized over $80 for every ride. That's how much the state government pays to support it because it loses so much money.
Right.
I love railroads. I love riding on a train. I wish I could take a train home to Southington from here. But I wouldn't ask the government to subsidize
$80
at that level.
Yes.
We just can't afford it. And at a certain point you say, are we going to do that forever? It's one thing to say, let's give it a try and see if we can
See if it works. Yeah.
develop it.
Yeah.
But at a certain point you have to say, that's not working.
That's not working.
And we can't afford it. And
Right.
rather than, again, go to the taxpayers and ask for more money. Another thing we have to do to get the budget under control, you have to have a governor that wants to cut the budget, and you have to have managers. The governor has to put a team of people in place as commissioners and go to them like a CEO would at a
Right.
company
And say,
you've got to find 5% savings.
Yeah.
Don't come back to me and tell me you can't do it.
You find it.
If you don't, I'll find somebody who does.
can do it.
But this is your job.
Absolutely.
The attitude has to change.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with you 100%. And you know, we take those things that you just brought up for granted
That's right.
because it's not in front of the average person, the average taxpayer, once a year, every day, once a month. We don't hear it. We heard it for a while about the busway.
That's right.
And then it faded.
Oh.
And people still don't remember how much it costs us each year
Yeah.
to run that busway.
Well, I mean, I could take some blame for that in a way because people say, why don't you talk about the busway? I said, well, I fought it for quite a while.
Yeah.
And I lost.
I
The
know.
busway went through, and at a certain point, you almost you almost don't want to be
Yeah, the
just a naysayer.
Yeah,
Exactly. Say, I
absolutely.
fought it when I had a chance, and now it's in place. Sometime I will revisit it in a serious way and say, let's look at what's happened since. But
Maybe you ought to do some of those editorials. I've been reading a lot of editorials lately.
That's right.
And you know what? I think we need to remind people where their tax money is going.
Yes.
I think that's so important because the average person that gets up and goes to work every day and looks at what's coming out of their paychecks, and then they pay a income tax, and then they pay property tax for their buildings, and they pay this and that and the next thing. If you're in business, they make you pay for licenses and this and that kind of stuff. People forget about that.
That's right.
If you're not involved with it every day, you totally forget about those things, you know?
A group that does a great job of researching these things is the Yankee Institute.
Oh, yeah, I like the Yankee Institute.
They put out reports regularly, and they tell it like it is in terms of the spending.
And that's so important. Like, here we are, you know, we're a small cable, you know, group here, and yet we try to bring to the average person that doesn't get this information in the papers,
That's right.
doesn't get it, and nobody stands on a street corner, nobody tells everybody where their money is going. They're just saying, we want more, we want more, we want more, we want more. We're going to get into tolls later, but not right now, okay? So, one of the other things that you said was, government works best when it's nearest the source and foundation of its authority, the people. I've found this is you now, I've found broad popular support for the principles of fiscal responsibility, limited government, and personal and economic liberty. Explain to me what you meant by that.
Well, the first part of it is funny. This afternoon before I came over, I was working on an op-ed, as a matter of fact, because I write them every now and then.
Yeah, that's great.
And it was about the need to return the functions of government closer to the people.
To the people.
The federal government should for years and years, we've been centralizing government. The state government has gotten larger at the expense of the municipalities. The federal government has gotten larger at the expense of the states. We end up with enormous bureaucracies that nobody can control.
Absolutely.
We have to start returning the powers to the local level. An example, I always was dealing with human services issues as a legislator. So basically what one thinks of as welfare programs. In Southington, we have a wonderful social services administrator, woman that I know very well. And I'd sit in her office sometimes, and somebody would come walking by and she'd say, "Oh, Judy, I've got a toaster oven for you." Well, and she called me up, I remember on one occasion, and said, "I've got this man, if we could do some dental work for him, I think he could get back on his feet, but he's not covered, and do you know a dentist?" And sure enough, I called up a dentist friend and I said,
help
I
us.
think that's what you can do on a local level where you actually know the people you're dealing with. A state bureaucracy can never do that. A state bureaucracy just is a bunch of forms and a bunch of bureaucrats and people saying, you get this, you don't get that. It's not somebody saying, that woman needs a toaster oven, and I've got one in my office waiting for her.
Right.
If we can, as much as possible, we should return those functions to the towns. Another thing that if you live in Connecticut, anyone who lives in Connecticut realizes is we've got 169 towns, which seems like a lot, but every one of them is distinct.
Yep.
And they can figure out their problems if they're given the means and the authority to do it. We need to give those powers back as much as we can. The problems in the cities are so great maybe that it can't be done.
I was going to say the cities are a whole different ballgame.
But Cromwell or Southington or Rocky Hill or
Durham
are towns that certainly could manage a lot of their affairs. Schools are the same thing. Schools used to be almost purely a local function.
Yep.
And over the years, the state has taken over more and more.
After piece
after piece. And I think it's simply unhealthy. Put it back in the towns where people can keep an eye on it.
Exactly, and their voices are heard.
And their voices are heard. Exactly. I can call up the school board member and say, hey, what are you doing?
Exactly.
If it's the State Board of Education,
they don't care.
Who knows? They're not elected by anybody. I don't even know who
collect
they are.
their paycheck and go home. Absolutely.
So we need to turn, and ultimately, as much as possible, we should put the responsibility in the hands of the citizens themselves.
Right.
There's only so much that the state can do or even ought to do to make our lives easy.
Right.
We're responsible for that. If for people that need help, the people that are disabled, the people that are ill, the people that are elderly that need to be cared for, I think we all agree on that.
Absolutely.
But people have to work out their own destinies.
Yep.
We guarantee it's life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and not a guarantee of happiness.
Right, but
a
the
guarantee
pursuit of it.
that we can go after it each in our own way.
Right. Oh, I agree with you 100%. The only thing I can tell you, and I disagree with you a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. I was a state ward. Okay.
Yes.
You know, from the time I was 8 years old, so I was 18, and when I became 18, okay, there was a letter from the state that said, and this to this day gets me. It said, you will be 18 years old on June 22nd. And it said, as of June 22nd, we're not responsible for you anymore, so
Yeah.
you have to manage your own way. So, of course, I went out and got a job right away, even though I hadn't finished high school, because I was finishing high school on the 24th that year, you know.
Wow.
So, but 2 days, you know, get out and get a job. But the municipality that started out taking care of my sister and I, which was in Watertown, were the ones that turned us over to the state. And I have to say that I had a couple of really good state workers. Okay. I would want to make sure that every child, if we turn it over to the municipality, that they don't become victims of, let's cut the budget, and so we're not going to pay so much for these kids that are in these foster homes. That would be the only quirk to what you're saying, okay, because I've lived it.
These are decisions, whether it's done at the state or the local level, government
Yep.
can still fail.
Yep.
And, but I think those are, that you could get, anyone in the state, including conservatives, would say is taking care of children that
Is
are
important.
I give you a list of priorities. That's going to be on the list of priorities. A
Priorities.
relatively short list.
Yes.
And police and fire department
Yeah,
and
you and I are on the same
schooling.
page there.
But we ought to make the list as short as possible and then do it as well as possible.
And that's the important part.
Yeah.
That's I don't want to see. It breaks my heart when I pick up a paper and see that this homeless mother and her 2 children are living in their car.
Yeah.
That really, having come from the background that I have, that breaks my heart. That makes me actually sick to my stomach to think that we have people in this country, mothers and 2 children, living in a car.
Yeah.
There's no way that that should happen. Somebody should be reaching out to them and saying, let us help you. That's where the bureaucracy scares me.
Well,
Okay.
that's why I think the way, it's just what I was writing about today, is one of the challenges as a legislator is, when I was elected in '84, I was made chairman of the Human Services Committee.
Wow.
So I, along with a House Republican, I more or less had legislative oversight over all these social services agencies. I didn't understand them. I did the best I could. I had very small staff, but good staff. But to try to oversee agencies that have thousands of employees, I don't think there's any other answer except to try to divide these services up. I feel like I'd have a better chance staying on top of Southington's services.
Right, instead of the Connecticut service.
The Connecticut services, the Southington services, where I can go in and talk to the woman that's in charge and
say-
sit in her office and see what she's doing.
Tell me the numbers and what's the age,
Right.
ages of the children that you're taking care
Or
of.
even,
and-
why isn't this woman, what about this woman over here? What are we doing for her?
For her.
You can't go to somebody in Hartford and
No.
expect to
Oh,
get an answer to that.
absolutely not. To them, it's a job.
That's right.
You know, and there's a big difference between a job and somebody that's heart and soul are in it because they know the person or they've heard about the person or the school has brought it to their attention. Okay, so yes, I agree 100% with that. I think we could get back to a lower level and get it out of the hands of the state, but in one way, having the towns being overseen by somebody to make sure that when they come time to cut the budget, because which you and I talked about, they don't go, Yeah, we have $300,000, but I think we can take care of these 150 people for 30,000. I mean, you know, I mean, I would want to watch that like a hawk.
Well, the state could be an advocate without being an administrator.
Good.
But I almost have more confidence that people on a local level would be concerned because they're actually going to know the people, and the people are going to be their neighbors.
I agree.
You feel an attachment to somebody that's in your community
Rather than somebody that's
who's
sitting.
abstract, who's just
Exactly,
yeah.
yeah. If it's happening in Cromwell, I'm going to be involved, right?
That's right.
If it's happening in Bridgeport, I don't know anything about Bridgeport, so therefore I'm not that involved in it. So Bridgeport has to take care of its own.
It can't happen overnight, and it maybe could never happen entirely.
Right.
But I think we have to think about rolling that aspect back and going. There's pendulums in politics, and I think the taxes are a pendulum that's been going only in one direction. It's got to come back.
Right.
And this centralization of control in Hartford,
right,
I think has gone too far.
Too far.
And how far back we can take it, I don't know. I just know that we need to come back in the other direction.
Right. Well, I got way far off from what I wanted to do.
Oh, that's all right.
All right.
We got an hour.
Yeah, we got an hour. Okay, let's talk about the Department of Public Utility Control.
Yes, okay.
Okay, because I'm going to tell you I'm a very unhappy taxpayer with the Department of Public Utility Control.
Okay.
Because I was for 25 years in human resources at Northeast Utilities.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And I liked my job. And I loved the people I worked with, all of them. The meter readers, the electricians, the linemen, the community service people, everybody. They were wonderful. They were wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. And then here comes this group, some of our CEOs and all, that go, oh, let's consolidate this and let's let Eversource now become the big honcho at Northeast Utilities. We're not going to be CLMP and Helco anymore in Northeast Utilities. We're going to be Eversource. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, I think it's the worst thing they've ever done.
Yeah.
They got rid of our Connecticut and Massachusetts and New Hampshire employees and brought on contractors. And contractors are wonderful people, but let me tell you, the people that worked for Northeast Utilities, when Gloria came in, the linemen, I was working in Waterbury, the linemen were sitting out on the deck waiting for that storm to happen. They had 2 to 3 days worth of closing with them. They were ready to roll. They weren't contractors.
Yeah.
They were employees, okay? They did community, you know, all the community relations for us. I mean, they had, we had a children's day where they had kids come in from the local boy and girls club, and the linemen and everybody that worked in the building put on this beautiful, beautiful picnic for these kids. Contractors don't do those kinds of things. Right. And the price of electricity has gone up since Eversource has taken it over. I'm very unhappy, and I blame the Department of Public Utility Control. So defend them if you'd like.
No, you know, well, I can say I took, it was DPUC then, of course, now it's called PURA.
PURA, yes.
Yeah. I wish they'd stop changing the name.
Yeah,
Just
well, they
pick a
do
name
that
and
to
stick
confuse us.
Yeah. But I took them to court when I was first elected because of a tax that they had.
Yes, you did.
Do you remember that? It was funny because it was during the campaign in 2010. I saw that they were having a hearing. There was a charge on our utility bills to reimburse the power companies for having to give up the generation aspect of their business because we made a decision. I don't know that it was a good decision to say generators are going to be one company and the transmission lines are going to be a different company.
Stupid, I'm sorry.
I agree, but we'll leave that aside. That was done.
For now, yeah.
And the government said, well, we have to pay the utility company off for not doing the power generation.
Right.
So they put a surcharge on the bill. Well, we finished paying them off, and the legislature says, you know, why don't we just turn that into a tax because nobody's going to notice it.
Right.
So I went to the hearing and spoke against it, and actually I have to say the members of the DPUC were sympathetic, but they basically said, we can't do anything about it because the legislature decided it. So I had a young friend who was a young lawyer, and I said, let's file a writ of mandamus and say, DPUC is not a tax collecting authority. What are they doing collecting a tax? So we went to court with it, and I had to do it pro se. I couldn't pay my friend, he was helping me. So I had to, first time I was in a courtroom in an official capacity in my life, I'm standing up on my feet, and I'm not a lawyer, I'm an English teacher. But the case went all the way to the state Supreme Court. And the good thing about it, Marty, was I lost. They threw it out not on the merits, but on a basis of standing. They said I didn't have standing to bring the suit. But I brought so much attention to this tax that the legislature repealed it, because they basically, the whole idea of it was to sneak it by people.
Sure was.
But I made a fuss about it. I would say if there were one thing that I would consider to try to get utilities under control, it would be to do what a lot of states do and to elect the utility control council.
Oh, I agree with you 100%, because I think they sold us down the river.
I think well, the people I will say that the people I've known who are on DPUC or on PURA, I thought were good people. But again, they're not answering to the voters. They're appointed, and once they're appointed, whatever they do, it doesn't really make any difference. They're not going to lose their job. I think if you had to go back to the voters and explain,
exactly,
they'd have a different
viewpoint,
and different incentives behind them. And I think that's something that I think ought to at least be considered, to have elections.
Oh, I agree with you 100%, because it's very easy if you've never walked in the steps like I did at Northeast Utilities for 25 years and seen what takes place and what doesn't take place, and have people say, Bernie, what are we going to do about our utility bills? What are we going to do about this? And I have to say to them, I don't know. I honestly don't know. But your answer, make them elected, then they'll be more responsive to what the average person has to do.
Well, one of the reasons I think we have the system we've got is because even the legislators can say, oh, that's not me. That's PURA that's doing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll say one thing about what the point you were making about contractors. And this is where I maybe to some extent break ranks too with my conservative friends. We talk a lot about efficiency, but there's a lot to be said for continuity.
Yes.
And when you have, I often think back to, I went to a small elementary school in Southington, and we had a janitor in those days, Mr. Ferrucci, I remember him very well. And he took care of that place. And he was a part of the school community. All the kids knew him and respected him. And he cared about the school. He took pride in the way that it looked. He knew how the furnace worked and probably where to kick it and
exactly,
whatever.
Yes.
You could say, well, we could get somebody cheaper if we just brought in a company that isn't going to care, that's going to send a different person out every week, that's going to have some 18-year-old kid mowing the lawn.
Yep.
It's better to have people that care about their jobs and that aren't just coming in for a week or a month to do something and then they're on to the next place.
You are absolutely right, because when Gloria hit, our linemen, as I said, and our cable splicers and our meter readers, and all ready were to hit the ground.
That's right.
Ready to hit the ground, okay?
Yeah.
But one of the electricians came to me and said, Murty, we are getting out-of-state people. Do not let them into this particular yard. And I said, why? And they said, there's a quirk in the electrical box there.
Yeah.
It has to be one of us that knows what's wrong there, or we're going to have an electrocuted person from out of state.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's your continuity.
Yeah.
Yeah, they knew to come to me. Make sure when they start assigning these trucks, they don't assign to this particular yard. And I thought that was so wonderful that they went out of their way to come to me and say, make sure you talk to, the head guy and make sure this doesn't happen.
Yeah.
All right, but now we got to move on.
Okay.
Because we're really moving along here. All right, here's my favorite. Let's aggravate the people out there that are watching this and talk about tolls.
Yes.
All right, you're on. Okay, we've been all over the place regarding tolls. Governor Lamont ran on a platform of trucks-only tolling, right? Then his position changed soon after he took office. Obviously, he has no idea that the average commuter does not have the wherewithal or the finances for another state of Connecticut boondoggle. I'm sorry. That's the way I look at it. And I don't have a toll outside of my house. And I don't have a toll in Middletown, right? But I look around at the people that will be paying these tolls, okay? And I think it's absolutely ludicrous and a boondoggle that this legislature would even consider that after all the money that they collect in taxes. So you're the state senator. Go ahead, argue with me.
I'm completely against it, and it's very much like the battle over the income tax back in 1991. And just as in 1991, everyone's saying, oh, this is fairer, oh, this is a reliable revenue source, oh, if you give us this money, we won't waste this money.
Right.
Right? And also with the income tax, oh, it's only going to hit the rich people. It's never going to be, it's just 1.5% if you have a big income. And as soon as they get the foot in the door, then it grows and grows. And the only time you can stop the tax is when it's first proposed. Once it's in place, once the income tax was in place, you couldn't get a rally against raising the income tax by 0.25%.
Right.
You could get a rally about, do we have an income tax or don't we have an income tax? You can get a rally about, do we have tolls or don't we have tolls? But once the tolls are up, if they say, hey, you know, we should expand this to include cars as well, they're going
to give up.
The line has been breached.
Yes.
And then if it's a matter of saying, well, the tolls are going to go from 75 cents to $1.50 or whatever,
right.
It's hard to, this is the time to stop it. And the fact that Lamont clearly they just want another source of revenue.
Absolutely.
They don't have enough pockets, they want to pick one more pocket. And they've got the gas tax as a source of revenue.
Yeah, I love that. Love that. Go ahead.
Two gas taxes.
Expand on that a little bit, because my viewers are average people like you and I, okay? Expand a little bit on the gas tax so that they get a better idea of what's coming out of their pockets.
Well, it's, the thing about it is, people keep saying, oh, all the other states along the seaboard have tolls, why don't we? One thing I'd point out is, we're the only state that has two gas taxes. We have the gas tax that everyone's aware of, which is so many cents per gallon.
Right.
Right? Used to be posted on the pumps, but not anymore.
Not anymore.
So many cents per gallon. But on top of that, we tax, we have what's called a gross receipts tax. We tax the gas when it comes in at the dealer level, a percentage. And that means when the price of gas goes up, unlike the per gallon tax, when the price of gas goes up, the amount of the gas goes up, the tax goes up too, because it's based on the cost. No other state that has tolls has that additional tax on gasoline. And nobody who wants tolls is saying, let's put tolls in and get rid of the gross receipts tax.
Of course not.
They want to have it on
both.
top of it.
They want both.
Now, if we get, they're saying, Lamont said trucks only, then he got elected and said, trucks only it's not enough money, it doesn't make sense, we've got to toll everybody. And then when he couldn't sell it, he came back and said, let's start with trucks only.
Yeah.
He said that multiple times.
Let's start with, yeah.
So don't kid yourself into thinking, oh, only the trucks are going to pay it, and all those interstate trucks. Remember, too, that the majority of trucks on the road are Connecticut trucks. In fact, the majority, 60-some% of all the truck traffic on the highways is purely within Connecticut. So a truck, let's say from Bizzuto's going out to the Stop and Shop with produce or whatever.
Right.
It's not an interstate truck. And remember, too, that even just tolling the trucks, they're not going to eat that. They're going to pass that on to us.
you and me.
But once they get those gantries up, it would be an easy business to say, gee, if we told the cars to...
Yeah,
and
they're not even going to notice.
The other thing to watch out for is, they're saying, oh, we're only going to put the tolls where there's work to be done. So if there's a bridge here and a bridge here, once they get the tolls in place, they'll come back. If they do it, they'll come back and say, it really isn't fair that the people down there pay tolls, but the people up here don't pay them. It really would be fairer if we had tolls
one out
every place.
On the
so the time to stop it, don't fall for this, because it's a bait and
Absolutely.
switch.
Yes, it
They're
is.
trying to say, well, oh, we're just going to do the trucks. Don't fall for it. We've got to say no,
From
absolutely
day one.
no from
Right.
day one.
Yeah, we do have a group that is saying no tolls, no
That's right.
tolls. And I'm with them 110%, because, you know, these people that are making these decisions don't realize that sometimes it's not the high wage earner that's worrying about these. It's the daycare person,
course.
or it's the waitress, or it's the young gentleman who's going to school and has to go through these. It just annoys me to think that they're trying again to reach into our pockets
That's
to take
right.
money again. I'm going to tell you, Joe, it really, really annoys me. And for an Irishman like me to be annoyed, it's not nice, you know.
NoTollsCT.org.
NoTollsCT.org, everybody. Did you hear that?
You can
NoTollsCT.org.
sign their petition, but let your legislator know. Everybody listening to me has a state senator and a state representative. If you
Do
don't
they
know,
listen?
oh yes,
They
yes.
really do?
I don't say they listen absolutely positively and in every case, but they're very aware of what they're hearing from their constituents.
Oh, good.
And if they want to get reelected on an issue like this, and we're in a part of the state here in central Connecticut that most of these seats can go either way.
Yes, yes.
Maybe in New Haven or Hartford or Bridgeport, the Republicans don't have too much of a chance.
Right.
But the legislators around here have to be aware of what their
what
constituents
they're doing. Yeah, because when I was looking at some of the things that you had brought up, it says the revenue from the fuel tax has increased in recent years, according to what I read from you, I might add. Fiscal year 2018 gas tax collected by 85 million over 2017. 217.
I don't like to accuse people of being liars,
Oh, go ahead.
but I will say they keep repeating this idea that gas tax revenue is declining. Oh, cars get better mileage, and because of the electrical vehicles. But the fact is, well, there's hardly any electrical
I
vehicles.
was going to say, I can't believe they had the nerve
Nerve
to even say that.
But
Yeah.
the fact is, it's simply not true. Gas tax revenue has increased year after year after year.
Yep.
That's not the problem. The problem is they haven't spent the money where they should. And part of it too is that the gas tax revenue is paying for these subsidies on train travel that I was talking about before.
Oh, okay.
So it's not like all the money
It's
is
going
going
where
to
it's
the
supposed
roads.
to go. Yeah. It's just like everything that they get their hands on goes into the general fund, or it goes here, or it goes there. Special little interest things that they take
That's
care
true.
of, and you know, and that annoys me. It's just like, and this is one of my favorites. When we put in the lottery, remember, all
Yeah.
that money was going to go to education. Yeah, right. Goes into that black hole that's called the general fund.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, these are the things that annoy everyday people,
Mm-hmm.
working people, retired people, all those people that it's our pockets they're
That's right.
delving into. You know?
And it's caught up with them. The fact that our economy has still not recovered from a recession that took place 11 years ago, and the fact that we have a net migration out of Connecticut.
I'm glad you mentioned that.
People are
Yep.
leaving this state. It's caught up with them.
Sure it has. Why would we stay here and pay a lot more money when we can go a few states down and live a lot cheaper? Property taxes and all that are so much cheaper than they are up here. You know?
And the worst of it is it's the wealthiest people who we depend on for
That are
tax
bailing out.
revenue. That's right, who are bailing out and who have the most incentive, and in some ways for whom it is the easiest to bail out.
Sure
too.
it is.
Because you say, oh, I've had enough of this, I'm getting out of here. It's not like you're thinking, how am I going to sell my house? They've probably already got the house in Florida.
In Florida, and
So
they're just-
it's just
yeah.
a matter of saying, if I spend 6 months and a day in Florida, then I don't
You don't have
have
to pay these taxes. I agree with you 100%. Okay, we've been talking about taxes, and going to talk a little bit about the income tax.
Yes.
Okay, and you fought it. And in 1991, Connecticut introduced a flat 4.5 income tax rate, right?
Yeah, I
got
think
that
you're
right?
I'll take your word. You've got the sheet in front of you. It's a
I know,
while
I've
ago,
seen
Marty.
it.
I don't
I've
remember
seen
that
it,
well.
yeah. Okay, And it says, and since that time, the median household has seen their income tax rate increase by more than 13%.
Yeah.
Is that, how did they manage to get that all through?
Well, it's gone up a little at a time.
So people don't notice.
It's kind of, yes, that's right. And that's why I say that the time to beat the taxes before it gets in place.
Before it gets, yeah.
Because you can't organize a rally around a percentage, a small percentage
Yeah,
increase.
people won't come out for 1%, 2%, right,
That's
absolutely.
right. They've got to eventually just put their foot down. This is why the clarity of my position of saying I won't vote for a tax increase.
Right.
I'm not saying, well, if it's a little one, if it's on this and that, just no. I'm not going to vote for any more tax increases. We can't keep going down that road. And I think that's what you have to find candidates willing to say, and voters
That'll listen.
that will listen and pay attention to what the person does when they get elected.
See, that's, you and I are 100% on the same. I'm so sick of politicians promising me one thing
Yeah.
and then turning around and doing something totally different that affects more people than they think about. Yeah, I'm a Republican and I'm going to vote for this, and I'm a Republican. And I'm going to vote for this because my colleagues like it. Or I'm a Democrat and I'm going to vote for impeachment because all of my buddies are voting for impeachment. This drives me crazy. When we put somebody in office, we hope their conscience will be their guide. And it doesn't always happen that way.
It's the only thing, it's the greatest betrayal of the voters.
I like that. Do that again.
It's the greatest betrayal of the voters to tell them one thing during the campaign and then do something else when you're in office. Because what else do they have to go on
Exactly.
but what you told them you were going to do?
Yes.
So if you're Ned Lamont and you say trucks only, you better stick to trucks only. Don't come back and say, oh, I looked into it, or Weicker, who did the
Right.
same thing with the income tax.
Exactly.
And the worst of it is, in the case of Weicker, for instance, Weicker got the Profile and Courage Award because he had the courage to break his promise.
Yeah.
And I think, what kind of courage? That's like getting married and saying, I've got the courage to run around on my wife. I mean,
Unless you're married to an Irishman, and that would not be smart.
it's never smart and it's never right. You should stick to your word. But I'll say something about this, about people going up and saying I'm going along with my buddies.
Yeah.
I have many people have come up to me and said, "Oh, how do you stand up to the pressure?" If you go into it with a set of principles and you know why you're doing it, you're really immune to the pressure. And
Right.
if you're clear going in about what you believe and you state it clearly. So when tax increases were proposed, my leadership on the Republican side was very decent to me, but they would say, "Joe, I know you're not going to vote for this. Let me explain it to you."
Yeah.
But I didn't get my arm twisted because they realized they couldn't twist
They
my arm.
it wasn't going to work.
Yes,
Right. It wasn't
that's
going to
the
work.
easiest way to avoid
Yeah, the pressure.
the pressure.
Yeah.
Is for people to say there's no point putting any pressure on him.
Right.
And there's some of us that have been that clear. Otherwise, it's hard to sit in a room with a bunch of people who are all nodding their head
Exactly.
and be the one to
Be
say.
the one that's going, no,
yeah.
no, no, no.
But-
yeah, I understand that.
When I was a kid, I always remember the Emperor's New Clothes.
Oh, yeah.
But I always thought, even when I heard that as a kid, I thought, I'd say that the Emperor doesn't have any
clothes on.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
if I
but-
see it with my eye and I know
Yeah,
it, I'm
yeah,
not scared
right.
to say it.
That's right. And you wouldn't be afraid to say it, but everybody played along with it, right? That was
Something
that
to do
was
with-
something years ago, and that I forgot about that. That
Yeah.
is really great. Okay, now we've talked tolls and we've talked taxes, and let's talk a little bit about guns.
Yes.
That's a hot topic right now. Some states and some counties have sanctuaries for guns, okay? There are people here in Connecticut that want to take your guns. I know this is a hot topic, and I would appreciate your take on it.
Well, again, I've been very clear about where I stand on this. I believe the Second Amendment is there for a purpose.
Okay.
And I feel like we've got, at this point, the strongest gun laws of any state in the wake of the Sandy Hook shooting. this idea that every year we've got to go back and go a little further and a little further and a little further.
Right.
It's almost like the taxes. It has to end at one point. And when the gun owners, when people say, well, we don't want to take your guns away from
Yeah.
you, but they keep coming back and nibbling around the edges. And in this last presidential campaign, you had Beto O'Rourke come right out and say, I do want to take your
I
guns
want to
away.
take your guns, yep.
Because I've been a supporter of the Second Amendment, I've had many, many friends, again, especially in this part of the state,
Of course.
who are gun enthusiasts. I am not a gun enthusiast. I don't have anything against it. It's just not what I'm interested in.
Right, right.
But these people are not criminals. They're not the problems. And making them into criminals, or just making it difficult for them to pursue a hobby that they enjoy, is not making the state any safer.
Right.
We should be devastatingly hard on crimes that are committed with firearms.
Right.
But legal gun owners, law-abiding gun owners,
Yeah.
are doing no harm to anybody,
Right.
and they ought to be left alone at some point. And it's an easy issue. I really feel like the Democrats don't want to talk about taxes. They don't want to talk about spending. They don't want to talk about the failed economy. So they keep bringing, every session we have new proposals about guns, because there's a certain number of people that can get revved up about guns.
Exactly.
But one thing I'd say is I don't shoot, but I understand what we're talking about when we're talking about guns. And the kinds of restrictions that they put on guns, we're talking about assault weapon bans and so forth. It's not, every gun is a deadly weapon.
Absolutely.
That's the first thing. There's no getting around that.
That's right.
But to say this gun is bad,
But
and
that one's okay.
no,
Yeah,
it's not. It's crazy.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense to me either.
That's right.
Okay, because I look at this and I say, these people that are making all these, we have to do this and we must do that, and to make everybody safe, we have to do this. They are just playing to their audience.
That's right.
Okay, and the quiet guy that goes out and he shoots at a range, or he carries a gun for security, I have no problem with that.
No, I agree
have
with you.
no problem with that at all.
Yep.
So you and I we're doing good here.
Okay.
We're just one or two little things. Okay, now talk to me about, because I'm now on to the other stuff, talk to me about education funding.
Well, again, this is a situation where I think the biggest problem is the fact that the state has gotten so deeply involved in it.
Yes.
Throughout the history of Connecticut, education was a local issue, and it was almost entirely funded at the local level. The state gave a certain number of hundreds of dollars to each town per school child. There was this was it Horton versus Meskel lawsuit back in the 1970s.
I remember that, but I don't remember what it was about.
Yeah, well, they said that it's an inequity that the schools aren't as good in Hartford as they are elsewhere.
Okay.
And the state had to do something to try to improve education in the cities. And they came up with a formula where the state would fund
So
much in the cities and less in the suburbs. So to the point that, in a city like Bridgeport, almost all the funding is coming from the state.
Right.
Whereas in Greenwich, almost no funding is coming from the state.
Right.
Okay. What has happened over 40 odd years since that went into place is it would be impossible to go back. You couldn't say to Bridgeport, oh, well, now you're going to be paying for your education.
Right, yeah.
They couldn't even
They
begin
couldn't
to
afford
do it.
to do it. Right.
But the other thing that's happened is the education has only gotten worse and worse and worse over those years in these cities. At a certain point, we have to look at this and say it isn't working. We can talk about we want to help, but pouring money into it isn't the answer. What we need are alternatives for parents. And for years, there's been a movement towards having education vouchers, or however you want to do it, so
Right.
that somebody can say, I want to take my child and put them in an alternative school and have at least some of that money help
Right.
fund that education. I wish it had happened already, because one thing we had in Connecticut was a great parochial school system.
Yep.
It has declined and declined.
Well, there's no money.
There's no money, but if you had parents that had the money to pay, that could use some of their state money for parochial schools, that could still be revitalized. And we have magnet schools, which
Yes.
are independent schools in these cities that in some cases have had magnificent
Yeah, results.
And I think we've got to be honest again and say the problem has not been the money. The problem is it's just not working. I've been a teacher, mostly what I've done when I haven't been in politics. And there's no substitute for just finding good teachers and letting them teach.
Absolutely, and not having somebody standing over their back every
telling them everything that they're supposed to do.
And you know what? All these new programs that they use these kids for guinea pigs for.
Effectively.
One of my grandsons struggles with math because every time he turns around, they're changing the math program and then the kids are going, oh, we don't know which one we're supposed to be using, and it breaks my heart because I struggle with math. I got to be honest with you, I'm terrible. And to think that, well, because when I was a foster child, we went from home to home to home, and we never got the basics. And when you don't get the basics,
and you're stuck forever with
You're
math.
stuck forever.
That's right. You have to learn basic math, and you have to learn to read well.
Right.
If you can read, you can learn anything
You
else.
can learn anything, absolutely right.
Again, I mentioned my elementary school, Milldale School, long gone because it was too small, and they wanted to consolidate. But I had women that had been teaching there for 30 years. They look like they've been teaching there for 100 years.
Yeah.
But boy, could they teach.
Exactly.
Big classes, 35 kids in a class, and they moved us through that material. They were pros.
I have to tell you, I'm not even going to tell you my age. I'm not telling anybody my age. But I'll tell you that I remember my 5th grade teacher, Mrs. Turner.
Yeah.
Mrs. Turner started every day with a prayer, Pledge of Allegiance, and read us a poem.
Yeah.
Every day. And to this day, I remember Mrs. Turner.
Sure.
That's the kind of a teacher she was. She treated every child alike, and it was a wonderful experience, to the point that I remember this.
You know, Murdy, it's a funny thing. I'm pleased that women have more professional opportunities, but I think one thing that has changed is, in those days, the very most able women, almost the best thing they could aspire to do was to be a school teacher.
Absolutely.
And I think one of the reasons that there were so many good school teachers is the women that taught me at Milldale School, if they were alive today, would be doctors and lawyers and corporate executives. They wouldn't be teaching elementary school.
Okay, Joe, we're coming to the end of this. I didn't even hit all the stuff I wanted to. But is there anything you'd like to say right now? You got about a minute. Don't push your luck.
Well, I would always say the same thing to people that I always do. Pay attention to politics, but pay attention to your own state legislators, because that's where you have the most impact. And get involved if you can. If you want to get involved in politics, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, find out where your town committee meets. It meets every month. If you call the registrar of voters or the town clerk and say, where does the Cromwell Republican Town Committee meet? They'll tell you 7:30 Monday night at the town hall or whatever. Go down, introduce yourself, and that's the way to get involved.
Right. Well, this is the end of our program. And I want to thank Joe, who's our producer. I want to thank Joe, who's our guest, Kirsten, Tyler, and Chris. And I want to thank you. Thank every one of you for watching. I'm sure Joe and I wish you all a Merry Christmas. Not politically correct, but I really don't care. And a happy holiday. And thank you to our military, our veterans, our first responders, our police, who have been under terrible attack this year, countrywide, our educators, and all who serve and are unrecognized, the good people that do those good, kind deeds and don't look for any recognition. And to each and every one of you who respects and loves our great nation, thank you, and God bless you all.